The secret of the webcomics.
We're going to discover the body of
Night
School
Eve.
Monkey. Oh my god, she didn't leave the duck. She's been buried under it all along. Oh my god, the conspiracy. Ozone Ocean just killed all the other admins to be the top admin.
He consumed them all and inherited their powers.
And this is the QUACKCAST. Hello, I'm Ozone Ocean. This is the QUACKCAST number 515. This week we're talking about mental health. No, talking about mental health. So about mental health and because this is one of these things. It's really come to the fore right now because people have been isolated for a long time. COVID has kind of ruined the world, and problems that people have really come to the fore. Because people have been really focusing on themselves and been isolated, and things have sort of become exacerbated to a great degree, or people just realize that they have quite a problem more than ever. So, but before we get into that, we've got to do the feature. Let's see, there is a lovely feature to talk about. It's me talking about a feature because I'm the one who did the feature. And what was the feature that I did? It's called Way Out There. No?
Next down over, I think.
Yeah, it wasn't. That is something, that is the next thing that comes up. Yes, it is the next town over, as Tance said, because Tance is way more observant than I am. So, now I will tell you about the next town over. Hello, I'm Ozone Ocean, and my feature for the week was Next Town Over. A sleepy western frontier town is explosively awakened to the presence of a dastardly apparition. John Henry Hunter is a wanted outlaw, cad, and a magician of the dark arts, able to conjure fiery destruction at will. Vane Black is trying to hunt him down with a small arsenal of heavy ordnance, but hasn't had much luck. In fact, things have been pretty disastrous so far. With beautifully illustrated full-color digital art, this is a pro-looking comic. It's a Western fantasy steampunk story, compressed and full of fast-paced action, fighting, drama, and special effects. It's a very, very good-looking comic. I think you'll enjoy the lushness of it. And you're getting a Western with a steampunk theme, so you're getting a little bit extra here. It's quite interesting. You've got steampunk, magic, fantasy, and just really, really good looking art to look at while you're enjoying the story. It's more action than anything else, maybe a bit of drama, and a touch of comedy here and there. So I think you'll enjoy the Western tropes with a steampunk fantasy setting. So, have a look at Next Town Over by Amihios, and it's rated M for mature. And that was the featured comic, which is Way Out West. No, it's called The Next Town Over. Jesus, Way Out West. I'm making even newer titles out of the bloody words of these comics, giving more directions. Okay, yeah. Next Town Over. Right. So after that we have the featured music, which is of course Way Out There. Quite featured that last week, I think. Oh my goodness. No, it's not. Like, is it Way Out There? No, it's In the Woods. I'm somewhere, in the woods somewhere. I'm making mistakes all over the place. Like, just a person with like no mental health. My brain is gone crazy. Obviously, I'm a product of my environment, or I am influencing my environment through my craziness. Because whatever. It is called In the Woods Somewhere.
Chaos at this point.
I am. I am just pure chaos. All right, so In the Woods Somewhere. Mysterious, dark, yet indescribably regal. This music lords it over us with the richness of deep sound, trumpets, and a lilting gold ribbon of flute woven throughout, sparkling yellow and metallic, tying the whole thing together. So take it away, Gun Wallace, with In the Woods Somewhere. Was the featured music, which I can reveal to you is In the Woods Somewhere. We don't know where, but you'll find it. Okay.
Rainbow Connection.
Okay, Cammy. Well, so we're talking about mental health. This is inspired by Pitt coming up with the idea last week, mentioning it. And also, Pitt, you've done a few posts on Facebook about the idea as well, which was quite interesting. Because, this is something that, should be addressed, because we all have a brain that can, run not as we'd want it to, and we all have fellow friends and family and people we know who also have, their issues, and we have to help them through it. So, let's chat about this. So, one of the ideas is that mental health issues have either been exacerbated by, the isolation from the whole COVID situation, or that they've really come to the fore and, mental health issues that people have already had have become more evident in the current environment, current situation. What do you think about that, guys?
Yeah, definitely agree.
Got one agree?
I agree too. I mean, like you said, I made a post about it, and we talk about this a bit off of camera. So I think we're probably all took a moment of silence there, because we know once we say I agree, we're going to launch into all sorts of different things. But yeah, absolutely. I have found it particularly striking lately because, since I believe in normalizing it, I'm going to just come out and say I've been diagnosed with PTSD. And it's quite early yet. I'm still learning a lot about it. But at the same time, especially since people have been particularly pressured with, staying indoors and stuff, which is good. We should all be staying safe. But it's, even if it's the right thing to do, it can still be very hard on people to stay apart and always be vigilant of this monster that feels like it's kind of lurking everywhere. And when you've already got problems with anxieties, whether they're related to COVID or not, it can become a lot more difficult to deal with things that you might already have trouble dealing with. It's kind of like standing on a muddy hill that you slowly start sliding down and you don't realize that you're sliding down it. And as such, I've seen more friends on like Facebook and stuff like that coming out and saying, I've been dealing with this, I've been dealing with that, I have anxiety, I'm dealing with depression and stuff like that. And I think this is coming from the fact that we can only take so much negative stimulus before it just really starts to feel like you're being buried up to your neck. And then, you start to do things like disconnect in certain ways, or anyway, I was very inspired by the way that I've seen more and more people being forthcoming about the state of their mental health. And so I decided I wanted to do that too. And to my surprise, I've heard from other people that have the same kind of diagnosis as I do. And in that, I've also kind of realized, like I said, although my own journey in this has just begun, I've also come to realize that, PTSD isn't like I thought it was, like portrayed in movies or stuff like that. Not only soldiers get it, a lot of people in everyday life get it. The other people that were telling me they already had it, none of them had ever been to war. It was dealing with things that had happened to them in their everyday lives. And it manifests in a different way than it's portrayed a lot of times, which is, we often think it's like, the guy was with shell shock that, all of a sudden he thinks he's back in the jungles of Vietnam, and he doesn't realize where it is. And no, that's not quite what it is. There's nuance to it. And I think a lot more people have this and other such diagnoses or stresses and anxieties and depressions than we realize, because we never talk about it, but in talking about it, we can normalize it more and understand that it's okay to feel these things and to try to cope with them, and to understand that they're not the monsters that we often think that they are. And that we're actually surrounded all the time by people who are dealing with these things. And in that, it kind of helps you not feel so alone. So anyway, that was, yes, I do agree.
That's actually a very, very good point. When people by nature, and we are by nature, our brains are wired in a way that we seek put things into neat little boxes, categorize, file away, and have a very specific reaction to certain stimuli that we can immediately categorize as something, and then move on without any further analysis or investigation and the like. That's how we get the stereotypes. That's how we get even racism and stuff like that. But what that can stop if certain elements and certain realities that exist within the world of mental health, not mental illness, mental health, are popularized and people are aware. Like, for example, PTSD, for example, it does not come in a same thing as saying, like, for example, someone is blonde. When we say blonde, we do not expect every blonde person to have the exact same shade of blonde. There are innumerable shades of blonde hair. That's pretty much how it works for a lot of issues that people deal with. So, for example, PTSD or depression or anxiety or panic attacks or dysthymia, all those different situations and mental challenges that exist manifest differently in different people and hinge extremely much on the origin, like where the particular issue stems from that creates situation. So, not everyone is going to have, when we say, for example, PTSD, they are not all going to have flashbacks to Vietnam or turn or turn into, a meat grinder machine as they go through very toxic cups and stuff like that. So,
Rambo.
yeah, what I'm saying, yeah, even schizophrenia that especially pop culture presents schizophrenia in a very specific manner, or for example, or being in the spectrum, which is autism. Uh, None of these things have a single manifestation. Schizophrenia has at least three, maybe even I think four. I'm not. I don't. I'm not versed very much in clinical psychology, like which is the very serious mental illnesses. But schizophrenia has at least four different types. They have completely different manifestations. Within those types, they have completely different manifestations of the same
Masturbation.
type.
Sorry.
That's how diverse it is. Like mental illness is diverse. No two people are going to manifest the symptoms that are required for diagnosis in the same manner. That's something that we need to understand. You cannot have, as much as it could be, quote unquote convenient, you cannot have any image of mental illness. The only thing that you can have is that this person struggles with certain elements of everyday life. That's it. You don't know which elements, you don't know in what way, you don't know how often, you don't know what the triggers are, you know nothing. You have to learn. If you're interested. That's it. That's the tenet, guys. If you take anything from this discussion, this is what, my opinion, need to retain.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, like if schizophrenia manifested like with all the same issues the same way, then it would be very easy to treat because it would just be one thing. You give them a certain pill to cure it, but it's not. Schizophrenia, the people I know who suffer from that, and that's something you can't be cured from, and it's often gets worse. They are on a whole cocktail of medications, and they change. Sometimes they work and then they stop working, and then you need to move on to something else. And the doctors, like teams of doctors, they have in order to figure out the right medications, but they don't stay working. They never do. You can't just suddenly go on a pill and get fixed. You're like on 5 different pills, and it works for now.
Often they need to strike a very specific balance that even if it is very slightly off, it will not bring about the required effect. And there is also, we mentioned schizophrenia. There is also, which is congenital, and you can actually see the brain be different. Like it can actually be seen. But there are also people that are schizophrenotypic. And that's a whole different ballgame. They may manifest as schizophrenic people, but they are not actually schizophrenic. And those people can actually be coaxed into displaying more typical behavior in a more, like, without as much medication and stuff. So what I'm saying is that you cannot rely on stereotypes when it comes to mental health, first of all, and mental illness. Like before we start talking about mental health, mental illness at all, we should talk about what mental health is considered to be. Like, when are you mentally healthy? Who can answer that?
When you're neurotypical, when you function well within a community. What would you guys say?
What if the community has a norm, has an average or a mean, or take it as you like, that conforms to symptomatology and to manifestations that are considered non-adaptive. Now, what I mean is that what if you have a whole community that acts and behaves in a way that is textbook for a specific mental illness for whatever reason?
Well, it's normal for that
Those
group,
people
then.
would be those, and that's actually a very nice exercise for what is for what is typical and atypical, and why we stopped using normal. Because if you were, for example, in that kind of society that I described, if you were typical, you would be mentally ill. Now, being atypical in that kind of society doesn't mean that you are mentally healthy. You are not mentally ill with those symptoms. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's a very, very normality is a fallacy, and we only judge whether someone is functional and mentally healthy from two elements. First of all, as you said, whether they can be functionally integrated within the society they live in, and whether they can also live in a way that is sustainable for themselves. They are not self-destructive in order to be adaptive to the society. Okay, so that is mental health. Mental health is being able to function. The bar is that low. If you can function, then you're good. You're golden.
Yes.
And that's when we go with if it's not broken, don't fix it.
Yeah.
And like
trying to
people
fix
will not
something is...
encourage intervention if you do not, qualify, quote unquote, for certain dysfunctional behaviors. If you don't have those, you are considered, hey, okay, you're good, go, true.
And trying to fix something
So,
is often can be far more complicated and induce far more issues than not. Often, in every aspect of the world, but if you're wanting to fix someone, then you destroy all the coping mechanisms and all the careful ways that they've developed to deal with something. You just smash through it.
So
you don't remake people as in the old 1970s idea of rebirth and all this kind of bullshit.
Oh yeah, okay. That created a lot of trauma for a lot of people. By the way, there are certain studies that are fascinating on how people were completely unhinged, and that is not a term like a scientific term, but they became very disconnected from any kind of reference point. And if you do that to a person, that is the worst thing you can do, because if there is no reference point, then the person cannot decide the course, and they are dead in the water in a sense. So you cannot, you can, you should not do it. That's one thing.
Yeah, and not only, I mean, that's bad for obvious reasons, leaving somebody without the means to cope with things, that also makes them vulnerable to other more opportunistic people or entities, let's just say. Groups. You're talking about the 70s and stuff like that, and I start to think of all of the cults and stuff like that were on the rise, and a lot of people that felt like not just felt like, but that were harmed by certain societal things, or cast out, or weren't receiving proper help that they needed, turned to things like this that seemed to be more healing and open. And you see a lot of people still, even today, get drawn into the naturalistic, what do you call it? The new age kind of stuff that, forgive me if you're somebody who does subscribe to this sort of idea, but I don't believe that it really helps you with coping. And then that opens
level,
people. A lot of people in the New Age movement too are also opportunistic, and sell you things as a means to help you cope. And that's just not. And I'm picking on the New Age movement. There's still a lot of things out there, even more legitimate sounding things that still take that are still opportunistic and take advantage of people. Such cure-alls or whatever, or snake oil or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's so people also, I'm starting to ramble.
No. That's actually again very valid in the sense that no, it's very valid period. But what I want to say is that when you have a society, like societies can be dysfunctional. So when a society is dysfunctional, you get very telltale symptomatology within society itself. That's why we have social psychology, in the sense that there are mass patterns, like big elements and trajectories happening within society that can give you the hint that so-and-so society is dysfunctional in certain ways. And when you have significant amounts of people seeking to find, in essence, a different society, because they cannot feel that they are accepted into the mainstream. When I say the mainstream, I don't mean the mainstream fashions and the like, but they cannot feel that within the society proper they can exist, that they are so rejected and so castigated and potentially threatened that they need to break away from society and find some other society which will be accepting to them. Then you have, like, the original society I'm talking about is dysfunctional. Usually that happens with authoritarian situations. I'm not going to say regimes, because you may have an authoritarian regime but a non-authoritarian society, and then you have political friction and instability, but you don't actually have problems within the society itself, as in you don't get great marginalized groups that seek to break away or seek to attack the society itself, if you know what I mean. So if you have, however, authoritarian situations where, and I'm going to go to the prime example that we are all familiar with, if we go to Nazi society, though that was a super dysfunctional society, because it made for huge marginalizations of huge populations that were in every way typical and functional, and became dysfunctional just by society's categorizations. So that makes this particular society very dysfunctional. And people within it were not given the room to grow as a personality. They were pruned to fit a very specific mold. Okay, when that happens, you get a lot of mental illness of all kinds. You get a lot of people breaking away from the society, trying to flee in whatever way, not necessarily just physically live, but you could have a severe addiction, you could have sexual like paraphilias, as we call them, like sexual deviance. You can have some kind of workaholic. Right? What?
That's like talking about Eubanks. Sexual paraphilia.
Come on, let's not make jokes like that, because those might actually hurt a bit, and it's not right. So the idea is that, okay, and then I'm going back again to the whole environment thing. When you are within a society like that, if you are typical and you have a problem, you have a mental illness. If you are atypical, you probably still have a mental illness, but just not that one. Because you are forced to react to this very toxic society. And when I say toxic, I mean as a pathogen. It is pathogenic mentally.
Okay.
So,
On
yeah.
that subject, can we talk about, say, okay, the idea of not fitting in will also make someone be branded as mentally ill, and like, so there's this idea, like, when people look back at the admission forms for sanitariums, especially for women, they have all these things and they have all these reasons, like saying, "Oh, did not read the book properly," or like really specific stuff, was mean to the family cat, or like all these bizarre reasons for admission, and we take that like on face value, look at that and think, oh my god, if any woman did anything, they were immediately locked up in the sanitarium. And that sort of develops this, I think, as a false notion that anyone who is at all like budging the societal norm was immediately locked up. Whereas I think in reality, like if you read between the lines, it was a lot more boring than that. Was the fact that these people were like normally mentally ill as we would consider them today, but they didn't have advanced kind of diagnostic criteria. They just wrote down whatever, like it was a formal thing. They had to write down something in the admissions area, and so they wrote down whatever like the complaint was, or whatever would seem appropriate to fit. But in reality, it was probably people suffering from very real situations, like modern issues that we have, not being able to cope.
Absolutely.
For various reasons.
I would be reluctant to make any broad brushing, sweeping statements on that, because that unfortunately still happens today, but just not, well, I want to say not as frequently, but it still happens today, and I'll explain what I mean. But yes, it could absolutely be legitimate that people admitted suffered from something that was just not able to be diagnosed for lack of knowledge. Absolutely. Especially when it comes to women's mental health. Because unfortunately, there were a lot of stereotypes that informed evaluations of physicians and then psychiatrists and then psychologists, because that was basically the progression. Initially, the doctors made all the calls, mental and physical. However, there was also a political or financial element to this.
Yeah.
When, for example, you had people that were advocating for something that would completely change an element of society towards the better, or at least change it in a way that would undermine the status quo in some way, sometimes it was easier to dismiss this person as insane. So this happened a lot.
Yeah, I mean, consider that just until recently, homosexuality was in the DCM.
Hmm?
Yeah, well, that
it was a mental disorder.
They weren't dismissing them. They actually did think that
there any longer. What?
They weren't dismissing them or trying to cover it up. They actually did think that there was something that was not normal or natural because of societal kind of like huge blind spot in society. The fact that the homosexuality exists, and is a normal thing.
I'll explain why that happened. It's a lot more pedestrian, I would say, than as I said, the approach to what needs intervention and what doesn't change. And if a person is functional in society, not self-destructing in any way, and they are okay. So homosexual people are functional within society. They can go to work, they can go to school, they can have relationships, like they are fully functional people, and they don't, usually at least, like if they self-hurt, that's not an issue of the homosexuality, it's an issue of something else. So yeah, that's why it was taken out of the DSM, because it's not broken, so we don't go to fix it. So these people are not considered like any. Homosexuality isn't the only one that was the only. I don't want to say condition. The only status that was taken out of the DSM. It's just the one that was most celebrated for political reasons, because people were persecuted very, very harshly for their sexual orientation. But the general rule of thumb is that you have just to be functional in your daily life and within society, not cause harm to other people. You don't do all you do or don't do all these things. You are golden. We don't want to see you. Thank you. Bye. So that's why it was taken out. And that's why, for example, a very specific paraphilia that the people that suffer from it are advocating for it to be admitted into the LGBTQ movement, and it should never be, is, sorry for the trigger warning for this, it is pedophilia. Like pedophilia cannot not be within the DSM as a mental illness. Why? Yeah. Because it harms other people. It harms minors, people that cannot give consent, people that will suffer trauma within while they are in an early stage of their lives, and then they will also have issues that we need to deal with. So this makes the person that's suffering from pedophilia non-functional. Ergo goes into the DSM. See what I mean, and how the situation is being judged and evaluated nowadays. Before this new approach was accepted as how situations and statuses and stuff were going to be evaluated, things were evaluated a lot more culturally central. Like if the culture said that something was normal or abnormal, then that was basically taken to be the rule of thumb. And most societies, at least to a point, tend to view homosexuality as not normal, whereas that is not actually true. And we have moved from that approach. Psychology develops and evolves as any other science. And that's why it is extremely functional and positive within society that people that are diverse and are not they are atypical compared to the main population in their sexual orientation and stuff are being normalized, because they are normal people. They're just atypical. That means that they are not average. That's all it means.
Yeah.
Okay, but a lot of people are not the average. We are all not the average in some manner, different manners.
Yeah.
So,
and it kind of brings me back to what you were talking about. I guess this is more what I was thinking of when I brought up the whole homosexuality not being a mental illness anymore. Well, it's not, but I mean, not being classified as a mental illness anymore. Is when you were talking about classifications and, say, Nazi Germany and the sort of trauma that led to a modern day, not that racism and classism, racism doesn't have effects like that anymore, but I was thinking almost more along the lines of against sexuality, but more like sexual identity, gender identity, and stuff like that, and how today that's starting to change and become more accepted. Whereas before, it was never really quite addressed or put to the side, or kind of like, that's what broken people do. Whereas now, at least this is the ideal right now, is that if you're a transgendered person, you get treatment, it's not because you're transgender and you need to change. It's because the classifications and stuff like that you had to deal with in being confined to a gender that you don't subscribe to or that you don't identify with causes problems, and such as dissociation and stuff like that. And those are problems that a lot of times I believe are caused by societal norms that the person dealing with the gender dysphoria and whatnot haven't been taught to cope with. They don't align with that person. They don't take into account that person and their identity. So I guess I'm thinking more along the lines of how we were viewing people with gender identities that didn't align with our modern definitions of gender were kind of put in those very problematic and abusive categories.
Yeah. Gender. Okay, so I don't feel that I am an expert in gender dysphoria in order to be able to really extrapolate on that. But from what I have seen, and take it with a grain of salt, I don't actually like the term for it, and I'll explain why. I would prefer for it to be called sex dysphoria, like doing the sex, like the sex as in
Doing this.
sexes, male versus female, because it's not the gender role that is the problem. It's the feeling that you are in a different skin than you should be, in a different body than you should be. And this different body is very specifically male when you want it to be, you need it to be. It's not a want, it's a need. When you need it to be female, or vice versa. So it's not the gender role per se. It goes a step further than that, at least as far as I have seen and heard transgender people talk about it. So that's one thing. It is very, very specific.
Aren't there different like aspects of it though? Because you'll get a male person that identifies as female, but will want to still be male, and the same, like you'll get a female person.
That's why I said that there is a very specific difference, because if that's what you're saying, then it's just gender roles, really. And gender roles are extremely culturally defined, not naturally defined. So, what is appropriate behavior, look, dress code, job orientation.
People mix it together, and when it really shouldn't. Because it shouldn't.
I think that is actually doing a disservice.
It's a bit more complicated than people make it seem.
Yeah, and I think that, like, for example, and it might sound, I don't know, weird or radical, I completely despise gender-coded dress code.
It doesn't sound weird. A lot of people are. Yeah.
I feel that it is, first of all, it is a very class specific. There is a lot of stratification that goes into the way that we like a class stratification that goes into the way we dress, and that is eons old. It's not millennia old even. it's not something new. Like the way we dress is supposed to give a lot of messages to people that see us. And I would absolutely be an advocate for people to dress in any way they would like without having their femininity or masculinity balanced. Because really, what is masculine and what is feminine is extremely societal.
Yeah.
Like, take, for example, the color pink. Exactly. Take the color pink. It's coded for girls. This is extremely modern. Like, I don't remember exactly the decades. I think it was turn of the century and just like around there. Pink was a very male color.
Well, it wasn't seen as a separate color. Yeah, it was seen as a kind of red. Like in hunting jackets that the English hunters wear are still called pink. They're still called pinks. They are hunting pinks. It's not called red.
And we're talking about in Western society too. When you think about a wider world perspective and throughout history, what's considered gender specific can vary wildly, and oftentimes it's not like what we do. This isn't becoming the gender podcast, but
the gender cut
should be for the next one.
We do tend in our Western society, we do tend to heavily link biological sex with gender, and that's just something that we do. And so I think a lot of times, there are trans people out there that do just want the physical transformation. There's a better way to say that without it sounding like Sailor Moon, but maybe Sailor Moon is the good way to go. She's always the good way to go. But it's anyway. Not the thing that defines a trans person. You know, you're a trans person even if you don't feel the need for this kind of medical description, because and I think, but you're right, though. I mean, you know, there are a difference in the needs of trans people. That's absolutely right. But I think we tend to, just as a term, default more to transgender, because we used to say transsexual, and that's very taboo now because people kind of put this really nasty tone to it. Back when it was used more often, people would say transsexual, and it would be kind of equivalent to a degenerate person. So we don't really use the term. But yeah, you're right. I mean, but anyway, so back to just kind of what we were saying about, you know, like take it from color, the use of colors and clothes, to gender roles that people are expected to carry out and perform. You know, for instance, if you're a man, you don't wear bright flowers on your shirt, and to you know, if you're a man, you can't raise children, or if you're a woman, you know, just all these other different kinds of things. Those are categories that our culture has made, that when you don't fit into them, you know, perfectly, or at least you didn't, that life became very hard to manage, even if you were healthy. So that's just kind of what I was equating it to when you're talking about the categories and stuff. But anyway, I'm thinking maybe
it's all about. Sorry, please go on.
No. Okay. Well, I was just gonna.
Yeah, I am absolutely agreeing with you. We have to. This is again a skill set. To have be taught to think in a spectrum, not in like ordinal scales, because unfortunately it's not just like categories. It's also, they're also put in an ordinal scale. Like, I have to have categories, and then I have to also evaluate which category is the best. Like I have an anxiety attack, speaking of an anxiety attack, if I have categories and I cannot stack them in a pyramid, you know, and tell everyone this category is the best and that is the worst stuff. So this is a vice that has imbued all of the cultures, and I have seen it not only in Western culture, I have seen it in Asian cultures as well, but it might be a result of the general mingling of the world that has been happening for centuries, not just now. But the whole idea of calling a person lazy is a statement that should be only used for, flippant situation. Oh, you're being a crazy person and I love it and stuff like that. But you should not be using it seriously.
Yeah.
First of all, because it's a term that says nothing except that you are finding a statement absurd for whatever reason.
That's crazy.
And also, it has underlying value judgment that it's absurd and it's evil. It's absurd and it's bad. It's absurd and it's bad, your derogatory term. So definitely don't do that. And also consider, I wanted to finish up about people becoming hospitalized when they didn't need it. It still happens sometimes on purpose, like people are being called mentally ill and institutionalized for extremely petty reasons. For example, there is an industry, and I have seen it up close. That's why I can be so firm in saying this. An industry of families making a person within their family be the crazy one so that they can be institutionalized, they can get custody of this person, power of attorney over their fortune.
Yeah.
Especially happens with women, but it can also happens quite a bit with men as well. So, and it is extremely hard, especially if you have some willing dealing going on with the authorities, get people properly evaluated. So, yes, there are still mechanisms of making mental illness a tool for either political purposes or economic purposes or foul play. That said, thankfully, it's become harder to do, but it's not as hard as you may think.
Well, it's commonly still used as, well, it was always used as a political tactic in order to, like, as a different way of imprisoning people who are politically problematic, suffragettes or, like if you have to imprison a political prisoner and you can't, the legal mechanisms for criminal law weren't there, then you could section them under mental health ones because you only had to have an evaluation through, your pet psychiatrist, psychologist, or whatever. But it's still used, like in China, they have the mass incarcerations of the Uyghurs and, people who are problematically political, of the Falun Gong movement. So they were all like imprisoned under like mental health as the pretext, and they've been re-educated because of that. So yeah, that's still going on today, massively so. So yeah, we've just destroyed any hope of ever having any advertising from the Chinese government, unfortunately. So damn it, it's covered our chances. Damn it! It's we're sort of reaching the end of our time, so we can just go on with our wrap up. Yeah, basically. Okay, go on, Tom.
Well, no, I was going to say it is extremely interesting to talk about how our making webcomics help us cope.
Oh yeah.
Helps us cope and helps us be more functioning individuals. So preserves our mental health, or maybe at some point does the opposite. So, and that was Pitface's idea. So I do think that we should talk about that. But if we are out of time, maybe we do a second part or something like that. I don't want to
we have a bit of
overgo,
time.
overstay.
One aspect that I wanted to get
I
into.
like that idea quite a lot. Maybe it's worth having a second episode of this, because maybe this is like the introduction episode, right? Where we can really kind of like get into it. And then maybe the next one can be a little bit more personal, not that we need to go to detail about the nitty gritty of our skeletons.
I would be extremely interested in that, actually. If we were to do that, I have a lot to talk about there too.
One aspect
you will enjoy me on the soapbox.
One aspect that I wanted to bring up is the fact that, perhaps a very big part of this that people seem to not focus on for some reason is the social aspect of mental health. In that, obviously, like if someone deviates from the norm socially, they're considered mentally unwell because they don't fit in well with the society. But also the fact that together, we are, as a species, we are a social species, and we work best when we are imitating other people, we're bouncing off other people, we're having validation from other people. And this whole isolation idea of sort of being very separate and, not being able to move around and enjoy social activity, where we're not interacting with people as much. And people go stir crazy and they're just going, oh my God, I can't take this anymore. Being alone and not seeing other people. And perhaps that is exacerbating, aspects of, mental health issues. Or perhaps that is mimicking mental health issues, because when we haven't got other people to bounce off of, those, the problems within our own minds, because we are so evolved to exist with others of our species and communicate and to meet new people and stuff like that. So when we haven't got that available to us, we start to get really antsy and, a bit crazy. If you have a pet parrot and you only have one parrot alone and it doesn't it's not able to socialize with friends, people say they go insane. They pull out their feathers and stuff like that because they need that social interaction with others of their species. And with humans, we have this, communicating via video, Google Chat and Zoom and all this. We have validation through Facebook, that mimics normal social interaction. Someone likes our post. We comment on someone's post, so it doesn't mimic. It is a kind of social interaction, but it's not in the same way as speaking to each other or meeting each other. But it performs that function, and perhaps because we're isolated, we become way more over-reliant on that virtual interaction over the internet. So perhaps these are the things that are really, really coming to the fore. These other forms of social interaction we have to have in order to scratch that itch, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, totally. Since we are wrapping up, I just wanted to say one thing on that. The isolation is always a risk factor, as we say. It is something that tends to exacerbate whatever situation you have, especially if it is coupled with financial insecurity and other things like this. It's definitely going to be a problem. So it helps to acknowledge that this is a problem and not just try to keep a stiff upper lip and bear it, grin and bear it. Don't. That's one thing. The other thing is that once you have acknowledged this, taking control of it in some manner is going to be your resilience factor. What will protect you from experiencing adverse effects. So this is, of course, a very broad statement to make, and it varies from person to person. But if you could think with yourself ways in which the isolation doesn't control life, but you create a routine, or you create certain approaches and modus operandi, as we say, to control the isolation yourself. So you take back your control, and you are the one that control your environment, whether it is the small environment or the bigger one outside of society. It doesn't really matter. Take this isolation as a dry run for controlling your isolation and basically coping with being with your own self, which is one of the greatest challenges everyone has to be with yourself and live with yourself. So if you can take control of that, you devise a routine and stick to it, like a realistic routine. Okay, don't say, oh, I'm going to wake up at 5 a.m. and then I'm going to do push-ups, 30 push-ups. Then I'm going to run around the house, and then I'm going to wash the dog every day, and then this is insane. In the pop culture way, insane. That's basically not realistic. I'm talking about grounded things, be one or two things that you promise yourself to do every day, and then you work from there. Yes, just one thing. I'm going to do this every day, no matter what. Then after you control this and this becomes your routine, add something else. And this is going to help a lot your feeling of control and self-accomplishment. And that is, my friends, is a great resilience factor, despite the isolation. So that's my tip.
Very well said. And you know what? If you try to make a routine and you do have days where you forget to do it, or you just don't do it for whatever reason, be kind to yourself. Pick it up again when you can. Nobody's perfect. We're all doing the best we can out here. The world's hard enough right now, and without you being your own worst enemy. So just be nice to yourself.
And don't choose it as a thing to give up because you haven't destroyed your routine. You just took a break from it. You can always start again.
Yeah, exactly.
Pick it up.
And considering everything, we learn something. Like when you learn how to bicycle, don't immediately start on two wheels, and sometimes you will fall, and then you just pick it up again. It doesn't really matter. Nobody cares if you fall. Everybody cares if you get up and just get up again when you can. Really.
Yeah. Oh, we should wrap it up there then. That's a very positive end to it. Very, very positive. I like that. Affirming. All right. Well, thank you guys for listening to QUACKCAST number 515. I've been Ozone Ocean, and these guys have been Tans, Baines, and Pitface. Okay, so we are going somewhere out there, out west, the next village over. Be gay and do crimes. Okay. See you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.